Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel where we mainly discuss thrillers on Thursdays or Fridays, clearly if my work week is kind of busy. But today I was planning on filming my favorite audiobooks, but because I've been seeing so much discussion about the TV show You, and I've been getting some questions from you guys about when I'm gonna post my finale reaction, I thought I would go ahead and do this today. Now, I watched You initially when it came out on Lifetime, and I'm not saying that to be some You hipster, but I'm only pointing this out because I posted quite a few You videos, both reviewing the book a while ago, the second book, a reaction to when the cast was announced, and my review of the premiere episode. And I never filmed a wrap-up just because I felt like I didn't have much else to say because I've already talked so much about this series. But the more discussion I've seen, it's brought up a lot of other thoughts, and I wanted to especially talk about both the finale and my overall thoughts on the show. But I really mainly wanted to get at this idea that so many people seemingly despise Beck and love Joe, and that's something I've been seeing more and more now, especially that the series is now on Netflix and so many more people are seeing it. So that's kind of what spurred me on to make this video. But just a warning, of course we're going to be getting into tons of spoilers about the show, including the finale. I am also going to talk a little bit about the book and how it differed, and I think even if you've watched the show and have not read the book, I wouldn't worry about anything I'm going to say because more or less the plot is very similar. But anyway, first we're going to get into my overall thoughts about the show, then I'm going to discuss why people despise Beck, why people love Joe, and also some theories and discussion about season 2 and what I'm hoping will happen. So first, getting into my overall reactions to the finale, to the show in general. I'm not going to talk about the cast and the acting and everyone in particular because I've talked about that before in other videos. But in terms of plot points in the finale, I have to say I thought the most heart-wrenching and just well executed scene by far was when Beck was at her typewriter when she's trapped, and especially the line when she says, "From every boy masquerading as a man that you let into your body, you learned that you didn't have what it took to turn a beast into a prince." And I don't know about you guys, but I did see a lot of discussion online where this monologue really hit home with a lot of people, because not all of us, need to be trapped in a basement in her exact situation in order to identify with that. I think that's a feeling that a lot of us, in just terms of coming of age, that we have, and I just thought that was so well done. I loved I think her name's Elizabeth Lale, if I'm remembering that correctly, but that definitely was the most powerful scene to me, and it made me really think like, oh, I'm gonna miss you as a character. I also just have to say, fuck you, Paco. So he was added to the show from my understanding. Granted, I read this quite a few years ago. I don't think he was in the book, and I'm gonna get into that a little bit later when I talk about why I think people like Joe so much. I don't have strong feelings about him being added to the show. He wasn't a home run for me. It's not like I hate the actor, but I don't know. I just despise Paco. Of course I'm gonna despise Paco for what he did. I don't care that Joe is his friend, so he was trying to help him. I'm filled with rage about him. I'm also, and this is one of the aspects that I'm really curious to hear your guys. I don't want this video to just be me talking at you. I want to hear your opinions as well. I'm very curious, and I wonder why the show did not show her death. And so this is the part where I'm going to get into talking a little bit about what happens in the book. So if you don't want to hear that, feel free to click off. But again, the book ends more or less the same way the show ends. The show just didn't show some things that are in the book. So if you consider that a spoiler and you've watched the show and haven't read the book, feel free to click off. But when he's choking her to death, that was such a visceral part of the book. And I remember being really confused that it only showed him pulling her head back, or grabbing her head and pulling her back, and then it just cut to the future when he's putting her books up on the shelf. I rewound it because I thought I must have missed it, and then I thought maybe because it's being aired on Lifetime, maybe when it's aired on Netflix, they're actually going to show her death. And I did go back and rewatch the ending on Netflix to see, did they show it there? And at least from what I've seen, they don't. Maybe I'm wrong. Please correct me. So I'm curious why you guys think they didn't show her death. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later when I read the passage from the book. But I personally really do wish that they had shown it. One aspect I am glad they left in, as disgusting as this sounds, when in the book, when Beck finds the box he hides in the bathroom and it has one of her used tampons, I remember being so disgusted in the book, just because I think that's when it really became real, like, oh my god, this guy is horrifying and disgusting. He really is truly a stalker. I will say the one aspect that's kind of throughout the book that I liked more in the book than the show was I liked Joe's inner monologue more in the book. And I think Penn Badgley did a wonderful job. I think he did a great of a job as he could have given his material. Not that the script was weak by any means, but his inner monologue I just found to be quite different. At least when I read the book, I thought it was much darker and also funnier, even though that sounds like the two wouldn't be together. And I thought his thoughts about the world were so entertaining, and that's why I loved reading him as a character. And in this show, it feels like most of his inner monologue, although it's very well done and I do think it's well written, it's just different. It's more focused on him, you know, justifying all of the things he's doing and wondering where Beck is. And yes, that's in the book, but they leave out those other aspects of his character. But overall, I really did love the show, and I'd probably give it like a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. Now we're gonna get into some discussion on me wondering why people despise Beck so much. And I will say, a lot of people really dislike Beck as a character in the book, and I do think to a certain extent, and I'll get into this, she's meant to be flawed. A lot of the aspects about her are meant to be unlikable. But when I say I want to discuss why people hate Beck, it's more about that visceral hatred, not just like, oh, she messes up sometimes, but we're all human. A lot of people really despise her. To be clear, not the actress, but I want to just read you a few tweets I came across. And to be clear, I'm sure these aren't the meanest. This was, I just typed in "you Netflix Beck" on Twitter, and I looked at the first few ones that came up for me, so this was without any digging. First, Beck's a bitch. Unpopular opinion, Beck doesn't deserve Joe. Guinevere Beck is a lazy, drama, boring, lying, and stupid piece of trashy that hoe over there. The most unrealistic part of You is that someone as bland as Beck could have two incredibly hot people that obsessed with her. The creator of You really tried to show us how much of an obsessed, crazy psychopath Joe was, and guess what we did? We ignored it and felt pityness for him because Beck's hoe ass didn't deserve him. And I totally get that a lot of those are meant to be funny, and I will say I'm not whatsoever shaming people for enjoying reading or watching or thinking about or being attracted to villains. You know, I'm very attracted to Lucius Malfoy, and there is a difference between enjoying someone as a character and actually wishing that, you know, you were Beck and he was choking you to death. I don't think anyone is literally wishing for that to happen. But anyway, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about why I think it is I hear so many people complaining about Beck as a character and really making her out to be a lot worse than I think she actually is. I think number one part of it is that she's a much more relatable evil than Joe is. A lot of us know people who have cheated. A lot of us have worked with coworkers who were terrible at their job, like she was at the bookstore. A lot of us have friends who are kind of obsessed with themselves and lack self-awareness. A lot of us have experienced, and a lot of us probably are a lot like Beth, where we have seen or have very similar flaws to her. And I think because of that, and because we can relate to it more, I think that causes us to be more easy to dislike her because it hits home a lot more. I think it's very similar to say something like 500 Days of Summer, where, just throwing it out there, if you've watched 500 Days of Summer and you think Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character is very romantic and that what's-her-face is a bitch, you need to go rewatch the movie, because it's kind of similar to You in that this guy is putting this girl up on a pedestal. He's looking at her with rose-colored glasses and not seeing her for who she is, which is a real human who has flaws. I've also seen some comments going way in the other direction where they're saying, you know, if you dislike Beck, then that must mean that you hate all women and you're not a feminist. And I don't think that that's true at all. Like I said, I think it's completely understandable to say, look at this girl, she's flawed. I wouldn't want to be friends with her in real life. She irritates me. I think that's completely normal and fine. However, if you do some digging online, you can find instances, and I didn't pull them up because I was a little lazy and I only did 20 seconds of research on Twitter, but over the past couple months, I have come across a ton of slut shaming around Beck, so much visceral hatred, when in reality, Beck is by no stretch of the imagination a monster. It does make me think, what if the roles in this book were reversed? If we had a guy who maybe cheated once, who was a little self-obsessed and lacked self-awareness, if he had the same flaws Beck did, would people be hating on him as much? I don't know, but I think it's worth thinking about. Now I want to talk a little bit about why people seem to be so obsessed with Joe. Now I will admit, you can feel free to go watch my You review from years ago, and you can tell in it I'm also obsessed with Joe. Now I want to be clear, I'm much more obsessed with Joe in the book, only because, like I said, I find him incredibly funny, whereas in the show I think Penn Badgley is a wonderful actor. But you know, if Joe fell off a cliff in the show, I would not be upset. But I also think, and we'll get into this, I think that's what Penn Badgley wants us viewers to feel. It's very clear when you read some of his interviews, he wants us to despise Joe. But like I was saying before, I think it's very easy for us as a viewer or a reader to fall for Joe, because much as these horrible things are happening to Beck, I think we know he as a character isn't real. There's no way Joe can come out of the show and strangle us to death. But we do know Penn Badgley is a real person, and he's attractive and he's likable, and we enjoy Joe's character aside from the murder. And overall, and this could be a whole separate video, but it's very normal to be attracted to attractive villains. We're also in his head, so since he's the narrator and he's constantly justifying the things that he does, it kind of gets in our head, and then we start justifying the things that he does. And I highly recommend taking your time and going online and reading some of their articles about it, where Penn Badgley is kind of making fun of people who have fallen in love with Joe and really want to date him. It's incredibly entertaining, and he even says, I remember it vividly, I think it's on Twitter, he says that seeing how people reacted to Joe and how people have fallen for him gives him all the motivation he needs to make Joe even more terrifying in season 2. I also think that they added Paco probably to humanize him. That's what me and some of my friends were talking about. We were wondering why Paco was added, and a lot of us think it's to make Joe more sympathetic as a character. And as much as we've seen him be a killer on the show and kill, what was it, 3 people on the show, I believe, because we don't see him kill Beck, I think that makes it a lot easier to not hate him. That is why I'm going to read Beck's death scene, because I hadn't read this in a long time, and I think it's worth hearing for those of you who have maybe watched the show and not read the book. But again, even though she's dead in the show and dead in the book, if you consider this a spoiler, feel free to click out. So just to set the stage, they're down in the basement, he's choking her. And just to be clear, if you haven't read the book, the reason the book is called You is because throughout the book he refers to Beck as you. So again, he's choking her, and he says, "You have one word left in you, help. And I do help you. I take my right hand, reach for your Da Vinci Code. I shove the book into my mouth and bite off a few pages. I yank the book away and toss it and grab the torn pages out of my mouth, wet with saliva that you wanted so badly. My last words to you, open up, Guinevere. I shove the pages into your mouth and your pupils slip around and your back arches. This is the sound of you dying. Their bones cracking. Where? I do not know. And tear ducts in emergency mode. The tear of death seeps out of your left eye onto your porcelain cheek, and your eyes are fixated on somewhere I have never traveled." I do wonder why they didn't show that scene in the show, and I have a couple theories, and now we're gonna get into theories about season 2. Now, if I'm gonna guess why they didn't show the death, I think at this point, a lot of people are theorizing, is Beck still alive, even though she clearly is dead in the book? Maybe they're gonna keep her alive for season 2 of the show. I do think she's dead in the show, but I think they're maybe pulling a Pretty Little Liars. If you haven't seen Pretty Little Liars, I don't recommend it. It goes downhill very quickly towards the end. But Pretty Little Liars was famous for having characters that were so obviously dead, but because you never really saw their body, although sometimes you even saw their dead body, but because you never necessarily technically saw them die, sorry if you can hear that, there's a leaf blower, but I've got to get through this, but because you never actually see it, that leaves the writers and the producers with just that opportunity that if down the road they decided they wanted to bring this character back, they kind of justifiably could. Personally, that's my theory. I think she's dead. I know a lot of people were saying, you know, she's definitely alive because they didn't show it, and then I saw other people saying, they found a fucking body. But then other people are saying, well, it could have been the abusive neighbor, you know, you never actually saw it, it's wrapped up, even though it definitely looked Beck's size, that neighbor was a lot bigger than that body looked. So personally, that is my theory. I think that she is dead in the show, but they didn't show her body or her death because they wanted to just leave the opportunity for themselves in case they decide to bring her back. I also do think the show wanted to romanticize Joe a little bit and make him a little bit more likable. Again, that's why I think they added Paco Mako, just so people would want to stick around for season 2, and maybe they thought that people would hate Joe too much if they really showed that scene I just read you, and then maybe they're worried that people wouldn't want to watch season 2. Now, I have a spoiler-free review of Hidden Bodies by Caroline Kepnes's book 2, and I have to say I will not be upset if the show decides to go in a different direction than Hidden Bodies, and that's not because I hated Hidden Bodies by any means, but at the same time, I would really love to see John Stamos kill Joe. I would love John Stamos, Candace, and whoever that PI was that was hired. I think it was by Peach's family. I can't remember. I would love the 3 of them to team up and slowly murder Joe. I'm not giving away anything that happens in Hidden Bodies, the second book, but please let me know what were your thoughts on the show. Do you love Joe? Do you despise Beck? I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts, especially on why you don't think they showed her death and if she's actually dead in the show. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you guys next Thursday when I will be posting my first Year of the Horror book club review of We Need to Talk About Kevin. So hope you guys had a great week, and I'll see you all next Thursday. Bye.